Welcome to 100. All right, that was my mistake. That was my mistake that time. It was a
Wow.
stupid thing right here. All right, so you
Wow.
know what? Fine. Okay, let's just do it again. Ready?
Yep. Yep. Go.
Welcome to episode 134 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Once again, I'm joined by Mary, a woman who has never destroyed a railroad, but has emptied a few Amtrak train bars along the way. I am merely a twisted piece of track named Darren. All aboard, Mary. All aboard. How are you?
Just for the record, I have never been on Amtrak before.
You've been in that's the fancy train.
That's the commuter rail.
Isn't it Amtrak? I don't know.
No,
I
it's
know.
an Amtrak is the thing that goes like from Boston to New York. It's the company.
Oh, all
I
right,
don't
fine.
know.
Well, you sat in South Station, emptied a few beers along the way. I'm sure you have. Okay, you're so full of it. So full. What's going on with you, Mary? What's happening? What's going on with you today?
Well, we were back here recording episode 134.
Yeah, we are.
We're back in the Eastern Theater again, but
Mhm.
before we get to our episode, we have to get to something else, our beverages.
Oh my God, I wasn't going to forget, Mary. I'm going to ask you a question. This is a very important question, of course. What are you drinking on this fine Friday evening?
I'm drinking Heritage Haze by Untold Brewing, which is a local brewery here in Plymouth. And I am drinking it out of my William Tecumseh Sherman mug with a picture of him and his staff. And yes, that includes General Oliver Otis Howard, who will not be making an appearance in this episode because at the time the Battle of Reams Station is happening, Howard is out in the Western Theater, well into the Atlanta campaign with
Hmm.
Sherman.
Okay, well,
And
very
what are you
excited.
drinking?
Oh, thank you, Mary. I really didn't think you would ask. I'm drinking. It's called European Golf Trip, also from Untold in Plymouth. What a coincidence! And I'm drinking it from my unconditional surrender U.S. Grant mug because he is part of this episode. He did not get sent west. He came over east this time. We're going to talk about this a little bit. He's not going to be a prime person in it, but we're going to go with it. In this episode, Mary, we're going to talk about the choo-choos and how during U.S.
Choose.
Grant's his siege of Petersburg, and that Weldon Railroad became something that Grant needed to control, and that Robert E. Lee desperately needed to keep in Confederate hands. Now, back by the summer of 1864, Grant's overland campaign had hemmed in Lee's Army of Northern Virginia in Petersburg, Virginia, which is just 26 miles or so to the south of the rebel capital of Richmond.
Mhm.
Now, Grant has that monstrous army literally on the doorstep of Richmond. Lee's supply line, that vital supply line, depended on the Weldon Railroad. This is a line connecting Petersburg to the Wilmington Weldon Railroad, which led to the Confederacy's only remaining port in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So, without this line, Lee's days would be numbered because he could not feed, nor could he supply his army in the face of Grant, who would be happy to starve him out and end the war in the East. So both armies both knew this. In the summer of June of, say, 1864, Grant begins his overall plan to destroy the railroads around Petersburg, thus choking Lee into submission. Pretty basic game plan, right?
He and Sherman are both doing the same thing in the Eastern and the Western Theater, which is, they're focused on destroying the railroads. And Sherman is going to be especially focused on that in a few months when he starts his march. But that's what this is to cut off the supplies for
That
Lee
is
and his
true.
army.
So June 21st, 1864, the Union begins to basically dismantle some of the Weldon's Railroad outside of Petersburg, which would be the result of the Battle of Jerusalem Park, which some troops of the Second Corps and the Fourth Corps, commanded by David Bell Birney and Horatio Wright, respectively, were basically eventually chased off by William Mahomes' division of A.P.
Mhm.
Hill's Third Corps. We're not going to talk any details of these things. I'm trying to set this whole thing up, Mary, so you can try to pay attention. It might help you a little bit with this. But a few weeks later, on August 14th, Grant's going to attack the rail lines north of Petersburg, which led to the Second Battle of Deep Bottom. Great name, not just
Wow.
saying.
That is
Okay, and this is going to be men from the Second Corps under under Winfield Scott Hancock. Again, Deep Bottom. But I digress. But this battle was
Hancock the
designed.
later years.
Oh God. Anyway, not right. But this battle was designed really to pull the Red troops away, while Grant planned another simultaneous attack on that Weldon Railroad south of Petersburg. Now, the second attack on the Weldon Railroad is going to be a much larger one. 20,000 men, led by the Fifth Corps under Gouverneur K. Warren, with some help from his friends in the Ninth and the Second Corps, as well as with some cavalry under August Kautz from the conspiracy trial.
Yeah.
makes an appearance with this. Now, when Abraham Lincoln learned of Grant's plan to destroy the railroad, he wired him on August 17th, and he famously said, "I have seen your dispatch expressing your unwillingness to break your holds where you are. Neither am I willing, holding on with a bulldog grip and chew and choke as much as possible." And Grant reads this, he looks at his aide and he goes, "The president has more nerve than any of my advisors." Kind of a weird quote,
Well,
but
that's quite the description is, and
yeah.
I think Grant at this point, he is becoming very much like a bulldog, which is, not really anything that General Lee has encountered to this point in the Civil War. Meade is good, but he's not like that aggressive general that Grant is that just keeps hammering away at him.
Well, we're going to talk in detail about him in a little while. But, Gouverneur K. Warren's going to withstand these attacks by the Confederates under Hill's Third Corps, mainly by the divisions of Billy Mahone and Henry Heath. And although losing like over 4,000 men, he's able to destroy several miles of that rail line south of the city along that Weldon Railroad. That's their plan, is to
Mhm.
destroy it. So, but despite losing so many men, um, Warren, he was thrilled with the results. This is going to be known as the Battle of Globe Tavern or Second Battle of Weldon Railroad, if you're nasty.
Yeah. Well,
That's what it's going to be called.
and this also forces the Confederates to carry their supplies 30 miles by
Right.
wagon.
Yeah.
But a member of General Lee's staff said that while we were inconvenienced, no material harm was done to it. So kind of, uh, it's almost like they're underplaying what has happened, but maybe it really didn't affect them too much. But I don't know. Doing my research for this, I was like, you got to carry your supplies 30 miles to bypass the new Union lines that are now
Uphill,
extended
uphill
uphill
both
both
ways.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah. you know. But the thing about Warren is he's excited. He tells Meade that he whipped them easily. That was what he said. But
Love Warren.
Meade, the old snapping turtle there, he was nonplussed, as they say, about this result. Sure, Warren destroyed a lot of track, and that was the plan. But Meade wasn't happy at all that Warren. This is hilarious, by the way. Meade doesn't. He's mad that Warren did not pursue the Confederates after he beat them. Isn't that irony, by the way? But
Imagine
that's what.
that.
But he basically says you should have pursued and destroyed them, which he didn't. But again, the job was to destroy the railroad.
Yeah.
The Rebs had set up breastworks, and now instead of sending men ahead to destroy railroad, because of the presence of so many Confederates, like around 15,000 are still there, Warren had created basically a permanent extension of the Union line. So what he does, instead of be able to move forward, destroy the tracks, because there's so many Rebs there who are now digging in that area, he's going to stay there at Globe Tavern. So now what happens? Grant's line is now moved. And Meade doesn't like that. That's kind of what the whole issue is. But nonetheless, Warren's successful, and a portion of the Weldon Railroad is now firmly in control of Warren's Fifth Corps. So to that end, Grant and Meade really wanted to extend and control further south down the tracks, destroying them and basically negating that Weldon Railroad completely.
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking baby steps. Now they want to kind of move a little bit further and further south. How low can you go? That's kind of what they're doing, right? So Meade knows he's going to need more men to do this. So he's going to go into the bullpen.
Yeah.
And he's going to call on Winfield Scott Hancock's Second Corps, who again had been north of Petersburg at Deep Bottom. And they're going to move 12 miles south and go beyond Globe Tavern and destroy the track south of where the Fifth Corps was. So the Fifth Corps is at Globe Tavern. The Second Corps is going to continue further south. The Fifth Corps stays there. But the Second Corps is going to keep moving down into uncharted territories. Now, Meade, he's trying to figure out what Grant wants here. He's confused because he's basically, Grant still is at his headquarters is City Point.
Yeah.
And also Grant's sick here.
Yeah.
He's not feeling well. Okay, I don't know what his deal is, but he's under the radar. He's not feeling well. So
seasonal allergies.
Who knows what it is, maybe exactly what that was. But for the most part, on Tuesday, August 23rd, Meade is going to message Grant at City Point and ask him, how far down this railroad do you want me to go? Because I'm kind of exposing myself recklessly the further I go down this railroad. Yep. He reminded Grant that the Second Corps is going to be tired from the Battle of Deep Bottom in that 12-mile walk through the mud that, as they're ripping up tracks, is also strenuous labor. So
Mhm.
he's like, you're going to put the Second Corps down those tracks. They're going to be tired. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be muddy, and they're going to be tearing up the railroad tracks. They're going to be tired. They're going to be pretty
Yeah.
vulnerable.
I think this
Yeah,
is a fear that Meade has in his head, though, probably post
yeah,
Gettysburg, because when you think about how the army was post Gettysburg, right? He remembers how tired some of them were, or how tired most of them were. And that's his thing, is he knows that battle fatigued men, like he doesn't like to put them in, and I don't blame him for that. Another thing to note here too is that Hancock, who is leading the Second Corps, he is still suffering lingering effects from the wounds he sustained at the
mhm,
Battle of Gettysburg during Pickett's charge.
right.
Um, and because of that, he doesn't quite have what he once had, so he's still suffering those effects, which we've seen that with other generals as well, like John Bell
Yeah.
Hood in the Western Theater.
The other thing that's important that he has to remind Grant about too is that the division that's been being picked to destroy the tracks. This is going to be the Francis Channing Barlow's division.
Hmm.
Old Swaggy, the
Yep,
first division
swaggy.
commander, is mostly New York and Pennsylvania men. They've only got 4,000 guys. So not only are they going to be tired, but they're going to be a limited number. Like I said, the path down is going to be muddy. It's going to be very difficult to bring down
Hmm.
the men, the artillery, and the supply wagons. And Meade's going to tell Grant for these reasons Hancock's men should not go much further than about 10 miles south of Warren's men. He's
Yep.
like, all right, we're going to do this, but let's not get hog wild and send him,
Yep.
all the, let's just keep him within range so we get them separated. And Grant's going to agree. And he's going to basically say, once the roads get dry, I'll send more supplies and I'll
Yep.
send more men. But in the meantime, order Barlow to go as far south as a place called Rowanty Creek, which is about 5 miles below a train stop called Reams Station.
Hmm.
And so if the Second Corps is on the march, and by this time, the Second Corps, they traditionally have been one of the strongest in the army, but this is a tough. They're in a tough shape now.
Yep.
Their march from deep bottom has been a brutal one. And so, after that battle, they're going to go back to their headquarters, right, in a
Yep.
place called Cockade City, where the grass is green and the girls are pretty. That's where they're going to go, and then they're going to get the orders to march again south and extend that new line, an extended line down the Weldon Railroad.
Hmm.
Oh, by the way, it's pouring rain just like it is right now.
Yeah,
This is what
Gibbon's
this is
guys were marching
this
in the
right.
pouring rain.
This is what they're doing with. Now, the division selected, like I said, was Barlow's, not Gibbons, but it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. We'll get to him
Yep.
later. And but Barlow's not there right now.
No.
He's not the commander. Barlow was on sick leave on August 22nd. It was basically less than a month from burying his wife Arabella, who
Yep.
died in Washington on July 27th, and she came down with typhus after attending to the sick Union soldiers. That whole story. So, commanding Barlow's division at this point is an acting division commander named Nelson Miles.
Hmm.
Nelson Appleton Miles was born on August 6th, actually August 8th of 1839 in Westminster, Massachusetts, just outside of the beautiful city of Worcester, Massachusetts, if you
Ooh.
know the area. I mean,
Great
that's
breweries there, though.
great breweries, no question. Before the war, Miles worked as a clerk in Boston and joined the Army as a volunteer on September 1st, 1861. Now, he got promoted quickly. He got promoted to lieutenant of the 22nd Mass, and then he became lieutenant colonel of the 61st New York, and then being promoted to full colonel after the Battle of Antietam.
Hmm.
He's going to earn the Medal of Honor at Chancellorsville and earn his star officially on May 12th, 1864, just in time for the Battle of Spotsylvania. He's only 26 years old, by the way, at this point. And now he's a major general. He's going to get
Yep.
promoted again. And he's got a reputation of a no-nonsense fighter. Now, I don't want to spoil the surprise. He's going to survive the war.
Hmm.
But you know how he's going to die? He's going to die in 1925 at the Ringling Brothers Circus in Washington, D.C. in
Oof.
front of his grandchildren. Fun fact: First Lady Grace Coolidge is going to be there as well. And I don't know what happened to him. Maybe it was the clown.
The Rosewoods
We
Clown.
don't. Maybe it was. I believe he had a heart attack, but that's what happened to Miles. It's
Mm.
just a kind of a weird story.
The
But
other interesting thing about him is
uh-huh.
post-war too, he does quarrel with Oliver Otis Howard over what happened with Chief Joseph
Yeah,
as
Miles.
well.
Miles. He's got a lot of history, especially he
Yeah.
does. But by the time they reach, Miles and his men reach August of 1864, Miles' orders were simple: advance down the Weldon Railroad and assist in the destruction of the same. Pretty straightforward. Screening Miles' division was a regiment of cavalry commanded by our friend David McMurtry Gregg, who rode ahead southward down those tracks to check out the next main stop on the train line, which I said before was called Reams Station. Now, when Gregg got there, Miles was relieved to get a message from Gregg basically saying, "There's no Rebs here. We're by
Mm.
ourselves," kind of like me on a Friday night, just no one there, right? But that's what happens. Now, Nelson Miles' division, they're going to break camp about 11 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, August 23rd, near the Gurley House, and move south and begin tearing up those tracks and burning that line. And they get within 1 mile of Reams Station. They're
Mhm.
moving pretty quickly. At this moment, who returns? Barlow comes back to take
Yep.
command of the division again. He's going to bump Miles back to brigade commander, and Barlow is going to immediately begin to survey the area around Reams Station. Now, Barlow was going to learn that there was no rebel infantry in the area, so he immediately sends a patrol out to take possession of the station. So by early afternoon on the 23rd, Barlow's division is now holding Reams Station. And while the men are going to continue destroying the tracks, both north and now south of the station. So everything's going according to plan, if it's going perfectly. Now, while this is all going on, the mystery of the whereabouts of the Rebs who fought at Globe Tavern, um, it basically is still being looked. Now they're being looked for by
Yep.
August Coutts' division of cavalry. They're trying to figure out where they are. A brigade commanded by Samuel Spear. He only had two regiments: the First District of Columbia and the 11th Pennsylvania. They're told to go west of the station and go look for them. So they're trying to tear up the tracks, and they know they're further down the line. They're
Yep.
exposed. They're all by themselves. They're on an island. They can be attacked in detail very easily, but they don't know where they are. There were 15,000 after Globe Tavern, and they can't find them. And
Mm.
so they're trying to figure out. But in the meantime, they're going to start to keep tearing those tracks up. Now, Sam Spear, is gonna find some Rebs here and there and drive them back to a place called Hatcher's Run, and he's going to call back for reinforcements, but no one came. Now, here it's interesting because he sees Rebs, Samuel Spear does, and he sends a message back: "I need help. There's Rebs here. Not a lot, but there's some." Nobody comes, so what happens is, over the past couple of days, Spear's brigade had been passed around like a comb on first grade picture day.
Ew.
Okay, they had been part of the Fifth Corps. They were part of the Army of Potomac's Cavalry Corps, and now they're part of the Second Corps. So what happens when Spear asks for help? Everyone looked around and goes, "He's not mine. He's not mine. He's not mine." So nobody came.
Mhm.
So he finally rides back to headquarters and starts firing off as many vinegar Valentines as he could possibly come up with to as many people as he could, because he was pissed off. Um, Gregg's division was also doing some recon work, and he's gathering his men around Reams Station at this point. He's going to send two regiments under William Stedman and Charles H. Smith along the stage road, which is about 2 miles from the station. And he's going to find rebel cavalry where he describes as more than a division. So he's going to. So Gregg is like, "Okay, I found some Rebs. This is cavalry, but there's a lot of them." So at this point, Gregg is going to call up the rest of his division. By 5 p.m., he engages them, kind of fights back and forth, nothing crazy, but he messages Barlow for infantry support. And when Barlow's men finally start to come, the rebel cavalry scatters, faster than when the bartender yells, "Last call for you." That's how quickly they moved, right? They just took off. The cavalry is not going to want to stick around in the face of infantry. But unbeknownst to both Barlow and Gregg, while this skirmish was taking place, a rebel cavalry commander known as Wade Hampton, Mary, perhaps you've heard of him. He's doing a little recon of his own, and he's surveying the Union numbers in and around Reams Station. So while this little skirmish is going on in the south, Hampton's watching all this, and
Yeah.
he's doing this to see what's going on. By evening, he will send a formal report to give to Robert E. Lee, and that report is going to say that the Union force at Reams Station was very vulnerable, and they could be wiped out in full and quickly with a quick, strong attack.
Mhm.
He told Lee that cavalry alone wasn't going to be able to do it, especially Barlow's division. But if he can get some infantry support, it could be done. As they were all by themselves, Hampton realized there was no support. They were holding their diapers in the rain, all
Yep.
by themselves. And Hampton knew if we can hit them, we can do it. So back at the headquarters, the Gurley House at night now, around 7 p.m., Hancock is also realizing that Barlow is in a very vulnerable position. So he decides to send his other available division under who?
John Gibbon.
John Gibbon
Yep.
down to Reams Station. So now is when Gibbon comes. So Hancock's sitting there. He's like, you know something? I'm getting a weird, my spidey sense is starting to go off a little
Yeah.
bit. Maybe I need some help. So he goes and gets Gibbon. So with 2/3 of his entire second corps on the field now, in the rumor of a DQ near Reams Station, Hancock decides he's going to head there himself to personally take command of the fields. So now Hancock's coming. So 2/3 of the second corps and now Winnie Boy is now coming to Reams Station. So on Wednesday, August 24th, Gibbon's division is going to leave that swampy camp at the Jerusalem Park Plank Road a little bit after 3 o'clock in the morning and head to Reams Station.
Yep.
So they're all converging to the station.
And the one thing to mention too about Lee with this is when he finds out that the Union troops are at Reams Station, he's not just considering it a threat to his supply line, it's also to the county seat of Dinwiddie County. Because if that were to fall, then the Confederates would most likely be forced to evacuate Petersburg and Richmond because it represented a key point on the Army's potential retreat route. The other thing too is Lee seeing them there and finding out that they're there is he sees this as a chance to defeat the Union Army not long before the presidential election in November.
Right.
And what's interesting about this too is the Democratic convention is about to be held in the North. And Lee at this point is trying anything he can to, get he wants Lincoln gone for obvious reasons. Now at this point, on August 24th, Atlanta has not fallen yet. It is still a few weeks. It's about 2 weeks away from falling on September the 2nd. But you've already had the Battle of Monocacy, and you've already got Sheridan doing his stuff in the valley. But still, Lee is like, oh, if I could get them here, maybe I could, just, get things to turn in my favor a little bit more with this election in November.
Well, he's thinking a couple things. And like you said, he thinks there might be an opportunity here, right?
Yeah.
If he can fight them and he can really fight them, he'll keep Grant from sending troops down to help Hood in Atlanta. You mentioned the election. That's an important thing, no question about it. But the thing about it, though, is going back to the Union side real quick. When Gibbon's men did finally get to Reams Station, they're going to replace Barlow's guys, and Barlow's men immediately return to their job of tearing up those railroad tracks. Now, at this time, what happens with Barlow? He decides he's going to take a 21-day furlough. Now, again, he's been through a lot.
His wife has died. They were very close. I mean, I can understand that.
Right. So at this point, he's going to take off and vacate the dance floor. Nelson Miles is going to get put back in charge again. Yeah. But when you look, but going back to Lee real quick, back at Lee's headquarters, I mean, it was quite a dilemma for him because he knew that sending men to the railroad to attack the Federals at Reams Station was very risky. There's no question. It would require sending his men over a long march with the enemy between him and his headquarters. But like you just said, Lee kind of had no choice with this. Yeah. Every day that went by, more and more of that previous railroad line was being eaten up. And if he did nothing, they're going to destroy the whole friggin' Weldon Railroad as far south as a place called Stony Creek, which is a station south of Reams Station. And that's going to make that entire supplies to Petersburg pretty much impossible. And he also knew the political landscape, just like you said. Elections around the corner. But he also knew that if Hampton was right and the force at Reams was vulnerable, that Lee had no choice but to attack, because if the exposed Federals, basically, he knew he had to hit them with as many men as he possibly could. Yeah. This was kind of an opportunity that came out of nowhere that he really couldn't turn down. Yeah. In this situation. So by lunchtime on the 24th, Lee's going to make up his mind. He's going to send 8 brigades, 2 from Henry Heath's division, 2 from William Mahone, 1 from Charles Field, and 3 brigades from the great Cadmus Wilcox.
Mhm.
He's going to send them all down there. Leading the overall assault is going to be A.P. Hill, who was arriving near Reams Station. Once he got there, would coordinate with Wade Hampton and his 2 cavalry divisions. Lee's instructions to Hampton were simple: do all in your power to punish the enemy.
Yep.
He's pushing all his chips to the table. You're going to go with Hampton, and you're going to go and you're just going to hit them. You're going to figure it out. So by 4 p.m. on the 24th, A.P. Hill's force is basically massed in the southwest corner of Petersburg, and they're going to begin marching south towards Globe Tavern, and then they're going to sneak past Warren's 5th Corps before turning south on the Vaughan Road before stopping for the night near Holly Point Church.
Yep.
Now, on the Union side, cavalry patrols are going to continue south and west from Reams Station, while Miles' men are going to continue tearing up railroad track. They're just going to keep doing their job, but the cavalry is going to keep their head in a swivel and look and just keep
Yep.
an eye on it.
But
Now,
one
a
of
bit.
Miles' guys. Oh, sorry.
No,
Oh, go ahead.
no, you got it.
I was gonna say, like one of Miles's men, he has the impression that Lee's forces must be weak, or he would never allow us to destroy so completely the main and important avenue of the South. So at this point, the soldiers are thinking like, wow, this is almost too easy that we've been able to do this. And I'm sure their spidey sense is up too with that.
Well, that's the thing. Like you just said, they know how vital the Weldon Railroad was, and up to this point, besides a little bit of cavalry skirmishing
Yeah.
coming off of Globe Tavern, there's been no resistance. But they know there's something's not right. There's no question. And a bit south of Miles' men was an intersection of road where the main Halifax road led to Rowanty Creek, called Malone's Crossing. Now, this is the same area now where Spear's cavalry ran into the Rebs that day before, and where they ran, and they're going to run into them again. But this time, when Spear asked for help, Miles is going to respond and send 2 infantry regiments, and they're going to scatter the Reb cavalry pretty
Mhm.
quickly. But beyond that, Greg's recon south and west of Reams Station didn't really find any Rebs at all besides the occasional skirmishers.
Mhm.
That's about it. A couple of Chick-fil-A wrappers here and there. That's about all they found. But they didn't find anything substantial. But with this feeling that they were secure, allegedly, Miles is going to send those 2 infantry regiments back for the night, back to Reams Station. And you mentioned before that one of his men was kind of, something's not right about this. It's
Yeah.
weird. Now, earlier in the afternoon, around 2:30, federal signalmen reported to Meade and Grant that they saw 4,000 men marching south along the Squirrel Level Road, followed 3 hours later by a column of infantry a mile long and 4 deep. 15 minutes later,
Mhm.
an additional 2,000 men followed, accompanied by wagons and artillery. So by 8:30 p.m. on the 24th, Meade's headquarters is going to issue a warning to both Warren and Hancock about this force that's coming down towards them. Now, Meade didn't get the message from Meade's courier for
Mhm.
about 3 hours, and when he got it, he was angrier than if someone took his last ring ding. He was because it was just this he found that this big mass of forces coming
Yep.
towards him. It takes him 3 hours. He replied angrily that the message didn't say how many Rebs there were coming. He also complained to Meade about the wisdom of having a second corps all by themselves anyway.
Mhm.
He sends that message. Meade responds that he thinks it's about 10,000 Confederates. That's what he thinks. Now, Hancock at this point is like 10,000. He goes, I've only got 9,000, including cavalry. And so Hancock again is openly wondering why neither Meade nor Grant was concerned about this.
Yeah.
Why was this coming rebel army that he neither offered to that he didn't need to offer to send any reinforcements or give Hancock the option to withdraw if he's attacked?
Yeah.
And so he's like, what the hell's going on? The reason was, and here's the thing, for whatever reason, Meade felt, and I don't know why, and no one knows why, he thought Hancock had 20,000 men.
Yeah.
He had 9.
There was clearly
And
a miscommunication somewhere along the way.
there was, and this is how people get killed, right? We said this a
Yeah.
million times. Hancock's adjutant, Francis Walker, he said it was from Meade's headquarters to reinforce or withdraw him. Headquarters alone knew the numbers and the positions of the Confederate troops. Headquarters alone could ascertain how far Lee's lines were being depleted for hostile expedition. So what is he saying? He's saying only headquarters, Grant, but especially Meade, knew the number and where they were going, and they're not telling
Hmm.
us anything. So by dawn on August 25th, A.P. Hill and Wade Hampton have already made their plans to
Yeah.
destroy Hancock, and they're almost ready to strike. Hill's infantry is going to move on Reams Station from the west, while Hampton's cavalry is going to move from the south and the east of Reams Station.
Yeah.
Three different directions they're going to hit. So at 5 o'clock in the morning on August 25th, Hampton and Hill, they're going to march with the cavalry heading towards Malone's crossing. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, Hill's infantry is going to start to move towards a road called the Gravelry Run. Cavalry's got more room to go, but they're a little faster, so he gives them a couple hours to go. By morning of August 25th was a very nervous one for old Winnie Boy.
Yeah, he's worried at this point.
Hancock was very scared. He was very, very scared at this point.
I don't blame him given the position that his troops are in, which is sort of actually, no, it's a lot like the position of the 11th Corps at the Battle of Chancellorsville, where they have, if they're attacked,
well, it's
not
worse.
Good.
It's worse though because he's a few miles away from the next Union army.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was. So Hancock is going to immediately suspend all orders to destroy the tracks and send some of Gregg's cavalry out where they're going to start to spot rebel vedettes now. That vanguard of the Confederate army, they're going to start to be spotted. So at 9 o'clock in the morning, Hancock is going to order Gibbon. He's going to order Gibbon to continue destroying the railroad tracks for now. And then we're going to have Nelson Miles' men begin to work to improve the defenses around Reams Station to prepare for attack if it's coming. Now, we're going to talk about these defenses for a couple minutes because this is really what the whole thing goes bad.
Yeah.
The defenses are really the deciding factor of what's going to happen today. So the existing breastworks, there were existing breastworks that were there about a month and a half before, and they were built by the 6th Corps, who built them to cover the return of some cavalrymen. The works were initially in the shape of an L, with a shorter line parallel to the railroad tracks and only about 30 yards to the west of them. So the line is to the west of the tracks, which is going to be a real problem. We'll talk about that. They were too low, and many of Miles' men complained about them, primarily because cannon placed on the line parallel to the railroad cut was too close to the tracks in the limbers and the caissons. Don't forget, you need 14 yards distance between the cannon, the caisson, and the limber, right?
Yeah.
You need 14 yards. You only have 30 yards between the cannon and the railroad track, which means any ammunition, any supplies are going to be carried down the railroad cut, up the railroad cut, and across, carrying this stuff. It was a horrible, horrible place for artillery. Miles' men themselves described the breastworks as too low and very poor works. The breastworks were real, but they were not spectacular. Is what they were.
That's the first time I think you've ever said that in this podcast. That they're not spectacular.
Not spectacular, no question about that. But upon inspection of these defenses, Hancock decided he wanted another line of defense to cover a potential attack from the southern approaches. So if you're thinking about it, the train goes north and south. Reams Station is basically to the right on the railroad track.
Mm-hmm.
So the breastworks are to just west of the railroad track. So you just get an idea. There's a line that runs northeast from that line that parallels the tracks is what he's going to do. Hancock now wants to build a southern one, is what he's going to basically do. And so to this end, he's going to order him to build a line connecting the tracks to that parallel one
Yep.
that's going to connect to the northern point that runs northeast. It's confusing, but what this means is the L now looks like a sideways U. The letter U, Mary, not you.
Yeah.
The letter.
Sideways
That's
me.
yeah, that's what it looks like, right? So although this new line protected against attack from the south, it also caused some new problems. Primarily because the whole area was so small, it's a small little U area. Bullets flying over the southern line meant that they were going to hit the soldiers on the northern line in the back, and that meant if they overshot. So it was a really horrific place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just after 8 o'clock in the morning on August 25th, Wade Hampton's cavalry is going to start to approach Reams Station from the south, just as ordered, and he's going to hit Colonel Spear's pickets west of that Malone's Crossing. Spear is going to hold out long enough to see the Rebs were coming in big numbers at this point.
Yeah.
And then his couriers are going to quickly report this news to Gibbon, who pulled his men from the task of wrecking those railroad tracks and hurried them now down to Malone's Crossing to help out. Spear's cavalry, who are all dismounted, they're going to slowly fall back in the main road, which is called the Halifax Road. And they're going to try to make a stand, but eventually they're going to have to haul ass to the fields and the woods, and they're going to have to get out of the area. A little bit north of Spear, Gibbon's men appeared and started to deploy, and they're going to spread east and west on the railroad when Hampton's men basically are going to attack them with artillery as was being wheeled in. Now, the sound of artillery is going to force one section of Hancock's guns to limber up and rush down to support Gibbon. And this back and forth artillery barrage is going to kind of begin, right? Now, Hampton does a really good job moving his men to fill the gaps as they occurred. And when Gibbon tries to outflank him, but Gibbon's infantry, when his numbers increase, he's going to message A.P. Hill and he's going to beg him to attack Reams Station with the rest of his forces. Because what does he say? I've drawn Gibbons down. So Reams Station is weak. If you attack because I'm attacking from the south now, they brought infantry south to meet me, which means they have less men. If you attack them full banana from the west, you're going to roll right through them.
Yep.
A.P. Hill gets the message and goes to Hampton, yeah, thanks a lot, but I've got this. Don't worry about it. and you just imagine Hampton face palming.
Yeah.
Hampton, they called he was the richest man in the Confederacy, by the way. That's what said about him, right? Now, Hampton is going to was able to send some of his troops, primarily North Carolina troops from William Cheek's brigade, east of the railroad, hoping they're going to Kool-Aid man through that gap between Reams Station and the Jerusalem Plank Road, which is the east of it. So they're going to try to go around Reams Station to the east and try to hit on that angle as well. This attempt ended up pretty quickly after some infantry stopped them. Infantry is always going to stop cavalry.
Yeah. So
at about 2 p.m., Gibbon's infantry is going to start to fall back to Reams Station now. So they were there, but now they're going to fall back. And Hampton, like that meme of the guy rubbing his hands with the trees.
Yep.
he sees what's going on here.
Yeah.
But he begins to smell blood, and he realizes that this troops basically are scattered. But now, if I pull them together for an all-out advance, now that Gibbons is gone, now I can come from the south and I can just Kool-Aid man them through. That's kind of what he's thinking, right? And while this is all going on, Hancock is starting to experience a true pucker effect moment now.
Yeah.
And his anxiety is now turning into a real concern. Yeah. He saw his cavalry posted west of the station on that Dinwiddie Stage Road came rushing back now with reports that they're running into rebel infantry now west of Reams Station that's coming this way.
Yeah, it sounds very similar again, going back to Chancellorsville to what happens to Howard. And there's one point where Hancock attempts to rally his men and his horse drops out from under him and he thinks it's been killed. So he proceeds on foot. The horse gets back up again. It's fine. So Hancock is able to get back on his horse, but this is kind of when we were talking about it today, this is not the this is not the stoic Hancock you see on
Well, you're right.
any cemetery hill, right?
No, no, that is
Yeah.
not. No, we haven't got that far yet. But yeah, but
Right.
he's this at this point. He's starting to realize this stuff. Can you imagine how he must have felt when he got the news that there was
Oh
rebel
yeah.
infantry west? That must have hit him like a truck. So he's going to instruct
It's
Nelson.
terrible. Like, I mean, I wouldn't know what to do if I got that news, you know?
No, no, he's going to instruct Nelson Miles to send a small infantry force to cross the tracks and head west to go meet these Confederates and see what the deal is.
Mhm.
Miles' men went out about 3/4 or so of a mile, and he set up a defensive line. But he came tumbling back an hour later with a report that a very heavy enemy column was coming down his
Mm.
front. So now it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just around the same time when Hampton's cavalry had just driven Gibbon's men back to Reams Station. Hancock now is going to message George Meade about this situation.
Yeah.
And this is incredible. This whole thing, it's actually amazing how the Union won this war when you look at all this communication. So he's going to report, this is Hancock to Meade, that vedettes had seen what was and he was extremely worried about being cut off now from Warren's Fifth Corps that was north at Globe's Tavern if this Confederate infantry truly was coming. Now, his fear was realized when his pickets captured two infantrymen who reported that they were part of A.P. Hill's corps
Mm.
and also spilled the beans that all of Wade Hampton's cavalry was also on the field. They said that Hill's infantry, these are the captors that they caught, they started out at 8 o'clock in the morning and had turned up the stage road and were approaching Reams Station. And by noontime, he was deploying his men to attack.
Mhm.
So he was moving the chess pieces around and he was getting ready to go. What Hancock did not know was that Hill was also planning to send a brigade south of the stage road with orders to connect with Hampton's cavalry with three brigades which stayed in the woods north of the stage road, who were going to stay back and prepare to attack the northwest corner of Reams Station, the breastworks. So he was going to split his infantry up. Someone's going to help Hampton. The rest were going to stay with him, and they were
Mhm.
all going to roll right through it. Now, while the men were moving, Hill was also going to send sharpshooter battalions to cover the western slope of Reams Station. And when they first got attacked, some of Miles' men, who are all green troops for the most part, because a lot of the heavy infantry guys got moved
Yep.
out during Overland campaign, they immediately fell back as soon as they started to get hit by sharpshooters, and it left a big gap in the northeast
Mhm.
section because they fell back. This was Hill's signal that he could move those three brigades south, and it was almost time to attack. The Second Battle of Reams Station was about to get underway. Now, the Confederate battle lines, they're going to come down from the northwest towards that western side of that sideways U, that shaped defense, which was a far from ideal place to defend
Yep.
that we talked about before, right? The one benefit Hancock's men did have was that there was a wide open field in their front, which meant that the Confederates advancing on Reams Station from the west had to cross a 200 yards of open field before they got to the defenses. Now, when the Rebs came, they came fast. And this is a great quote, too. It tells you what the mentality of the
Mhm.
Union was with how they felt about the Rebs. A Pennsylvania soldier said about the Rebs that first assault, they came, and when they got close enough, they screamed that women-like scream with that fixed bayonets as they came. A real shot at them is what that was, right?
Wow, woman like
Yeah.
scream. Oh my God.
And he said, when they came, we mowed them with grape and canister, and they recoiled and left the sod covered with their dead. Again, 200-yard fields, there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
A.P. Hill is on his horse watching this initial situation when suddenly he dismounts off the horse and lays down on the grass. And
What?
the men think he's wounded. But guess what happens? He suddenly gets sick. A.P. Hill does.
Oh,
He'd
not
been
AP
sick.
Hill.
He'd been sick seemingly forever because he'd been looking for love in all the wrong places,
Places.
by the way, right?
Well, he sowed
But
his wild
right,
oats in New York City.
Right. Not William Seals, by the way. But the sickness would tend to overcome him, and at this
Mm.
very moment, it did.
Oh, that
So
sucks.
so Hill had to at this very moment, Hill had to turn over his overall commands to General Cadmus Wilcox, who had to wait now an hour to reform those three brigades that he'd been holding back that were going to push back on those federal defenses.
Hmm.
Wilcox is going to shift the target of the attack now to the lower side of the western face. And by 4 p.m., he's ready to go again. First assault fails, second one's about to get going. When they advanced, they were again hit with that heavy musketry fire, from their front and from their left now. At this very moment, that U is working. Again,
Yeah.
not you, but the U is working. Wilcox has to fall back, and for the second time, Hancock's defenses had held and forced the Rebs to fall back again. So they're 2 for 2. Things
Yeah.
are going pretty well. Probably feeling a little bit better, Hancock got a message from Meade, and that arrived around 1 o'clock. And it arrived, and this is important, it arrived by courier from Globe Tavern. And it said a couple things. It said that he was sending him reinforcements from Gershom Mott's division, who had commanded Hancock's 3rd Division, and he would also be sending him down the Jerusalem Plank Road west of Reams Station. Meade also told him to suspend all train wrecking activities once he finally understood the rebel goal now was to separate the 5th from the 2nd Corps and destroy them. He figured that out.
Yeah.
Last, the message said, it gives Hancock the decision whether or not to withdraw from Reams Station if the situation got bad.
Mm.
So Hancock's holding this note. It says, we're sending you reinforcements. We don't know when they're going to come, but they're coming. Yep. Here's where they're going to be coming from. And if things get too hairy, you can take off, you can go. You don't have to stay. And once the message was delivered, Meade's courier rode back to Globe Tavern up the Halifax Road, which was still open. Now, the reason why I mentioned the courier is for some reason, and no one's been able to explain this either, for whatever reason, Meade chose to use couriers on horseback to deliver the messages to Reams Station when the telegraph was working the whole time. And he could have simply just texted a friend.
Do you think he was afraid of it being intercepted by the Rebs for some reason?
Who knows? But for whatever reason, and you got to feel bad for Hancock here.
Mm-hmm.
He's waiting on these messages, and this dude rides up on a horse, hands him a message, and he's like, "Why didn't you just freaking telegram me?
Yeah,
it would have saved all this time. The Rebs are on my doorstep. The wolf is at the door, and you send your man down on a horse." I mean, you can imagine Hancock is already upset and angry at this point.
Yeah.
And now he's like, "Me, what are you doing?" So just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Hancock is going to wire Meade to let him know that he's intending to hold Reams Station until nightfall. And he thinks he can hold the position as well as covering the road that goes east to that Jerusalem Plank Road. But he still had a fear that Hill would try to get between him and Warren. And that's what he really didn't want. That was his big fear. So right after the second rebel attack had failed, another of Meade's couriers comes riding up,
of course,
on his horse, with word that Orlando Wilcox's 9th Corps was now also being sent, joining Gershom Mott. So more men are coming. So at least he's getting the message that there's a lot of guys coming. But Hancock, again, is also confused by this message because he's like, wait a second. I thought I was going to hold this station until dark, but now you're sending me 2 more divisions? Is it Meade's intention that he wants me to stay now and hold it and defend it instead of leaving after nightfall? So Hancock is getting these messages and he doesn't know what the hell to do. This is an example of the communication and the confusion between Hancock and Meade of what was going on at this time. And this is just before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He's going to wire Meade again for clarifications of his intention. And just as he's about to send this wire, a report comes in from Miles that his men can hear the Rebs cutting down trees and digging in. So he knows the Rebs aren't leaving.
Yeah.
5:30 in the afternoon, Hancock gets word from Gershom Mott that he's just a few miles away, but now we're stuck in the mud on the Jerusalem Plank Road. But we're coming, but we're stuck.
Yep.
We're in traffic, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Must have been on I-93.
Oh, tell me about it. All Miles could do at this point is review the lines, and he became more and more concerned about that northwest point, or actually the northeast point of the breastworks. This is a site where Hill had first attacked, because he noticed that there's a gap because the way the fort was built, the breastworks, I mean, there was a gap between the railroad tracks on the Weldon Railroad and where the breastworks begin, because you couldn't connect the two because why? Because of the friggin' railroad.
Yep.
So to fill the gap, Miles is going to call up a New York battery of artillery, as well as a 12-pound Napoleon commanded by Lieutenant Henry Bauer, who, after seeing how vulnerable the position was, he immediately handed his watch to his adjutant and said, "Give this to my wife when I'm killed, because I ain't making out of this one."
Yeah.
And so he does that. It was around this time when Hill's 2nd Division arrived, commanded by Henry Heath. Those battle-tested divisions of North Carolinians, Alabamians, and Virginians. And they basically took over control of Hill's Corps at this point. Yeah. Now, along with Heath, became a very valuable X factor, and that was artillery under the command of William Pegram and his 12 artillery pieces. While Pegram moved his guns around to prepare to blast the Federal works, Heath deployed and prepared for that 3rd Infantry attack, aimed this time at the northeast point of Hancock's Reams Station breastworks. They found that gap, and this is going to be the point of attack. So 5 o'clock, Pegram's guns open up. Boom, boom, boom. They start firing. These are the batteries commanded by Thomas Ellett, Thomas Branner, George Casey, and Edward Merritt and Marie. Most of the shots were too long. They went over the breastworks, but guess what happened? They hit the backs of those northern men on the northern slope that we talked about before, that fatal flaw in the Reams Station defense. So they weren't missing after all. Pegram's cannonade only lasted about 15 minutes before Heath said, "We're going in. We got this."
And he personally leads the attack himself.
He does. Now, one of the brigades who's going to be at the front of the attack is going to be commanded by William McCrae, and it's going to have that famous 26th North Carolina. And there's that story that I think you kind of hinted at right there with Heath, right? There's a story where Heath is going to demand the colors of the 26th North Carolina. He's going to carry them into the battle. The color bearer says, "The hell you are."
Yep.
And then Heath basically laughs and says, "Come on, then, we will carry the colors together." And they all went riding off together holding the flag.
Yep.
That's kind of cool.
It was kind of funny. I read that. That was a funny story about the battle.
Yeah. And this is going to be the beginning of what's going to be the 3rd assault of Reams Station. Now, at first, the Federals pounded the Rebs that same way when they did before in those first 2 attempts. But the 3rd time is going to prove the charm for Hill's Corps, Hill's men. Union artillery is going to initially be blasting away at the Rebs, and they're going to. But what's going to happen is Miles again is going to be expecting to get driven back again. First time they came, we drove them back. Second time, because they're crossing that big field.
Yeah.
3rd time, of course, Miles is thinking that's going to happen again. So when some Confederates actually reached the breastworks in front of them, because they actually finally made it, 3 of Miles' regiments near that northwest point suddenly panicked and took off. And the whole line began to break. They began to turn. They began to run. Rebel rifles began to fire at those cannons holding that northwest gap I mentioned. And this is where Lieutenant Brower, who handled the watch, this is where he's going to get killed. So he was right. He didn't make it. He was happy he gave away the watch, but his time had come to an end.
Oh, wow! Look at you bringing the
philosophical for a second.
Don Rickles.
Oh, I see what you did. Okay. but Miles starts to see these men breaking. He starts yelling for a reserve brigade who he had positioned across the railroad. Remember, the breastworks are west of the railroad, so you got to cross the rail. We're not talking about it running across railroad tracks. We're talking about a railroad cut. So it's very difficult to get down there. Unfortunately, when Miles called for the reserves, no one came. The commander of that brigade was nowhere to be found. And so without a leader, the men said, "We ain't going. The hell with this." They just fell back and sat around. They didn't come.
Yeah.
So now Miles' line south of that Depot Road That was still holding at this point. So he rode over and tried to shift some of his men north to try to plug that gap that was forming in the northwest section, while his men were panicking and running around everywhere. Now, one regiment that did not run was the 61st New York, who basically faced the northern edge of the U and did not budge. Miles ended up personally leading this regiment, and basically, as he tried to capture a lost New York battery, is what they kind of did.
Mm.
Also, there is guess who? Hancock.
Yeah.
This is the thing about Hancock. This is how they described Hancock at this moment. One
Mm.
soldier said, with a sword in hand and a hat in the other, he faced the retreating regiments coming from the center and yelled, "For God's sakes, do not run." Another soldier described Hancock as a wild man. Another said, more a soldier possessed with a restless and demonic spirit than a general commanding in a good cause.
Whoa.
So, to your point, this is not calm Winnie on Cemetery Hill calming the troops. This is Hancock losing his mind. He's running around.
He needs Dean and Sam to come in.
Like I said, one of the men said he looked like he was possessed by a demonic spirit. That's how agitated he was.
That's why we need the Winchesters.
I can only imagine how much money he had to put in the swear jar after this one.
Oh yeah,
because this was a moment where he lost it. He absolutely lost it.
Yeah, and I think they all have those moments though, because they are all human and they have the moments where they lose it. You know, like Howard was kind of that way after being on the field all day on July 1st at Gettysburg. He's described as seeming very anxiety ridden and agitated. And this is, Hancock is this way too. And I would be too. I think any of us would in that position. And there's one point where Hancock said, "I do not care to die, but I pray God I may never leave this field."
Yeah, that's a quote that he'll say.
Yeah.
Hancock's going to call up on Gibbon to send any help he could, who immediately, Gibbon did, ordered 2 brigades to take the western breastworks, but retreating soldiers and blocked them from getting there. Gibbon's trying to send men forward.
Yep.
It's like running on the subway. They can't move forward because men are going back, and they're all stuck and bumping into each other in the middle of this U. And that's what's Gibbon is also dealing with the rebels in the front, combined with Hampton's cavalry attacking from that southern area. His soldiers are taking fire from 3 different places at this point. The nightmare of that breastworks is coming true. Southern soldiers are pouring through the breastworks on the south side of the U, but on the north side, Miles is still holding with those 61st New York, and they're trying basically to help as some men are pushing Rebs from the south, the subs through that south gate. But regardless, at this point, that U is turned inside out at this point. Though some regiments on the north side, they're still facing where they held. This whole thing is a tinderbox ready to go. There's Confederate rushing in, men trying to hold, guys trying to go to the back, trying to go to the front. When darkness starts to fall, Hancock is going to do his best as a last ditch. I'm talking, Mary. Last ditch effort to counterattack to try to take the position that they'd lost. And Miles agreed, but Gibbon says, "You know something? My men are too tired. We're not going to participate in this. We ain't doing it." So imagine Dave McMurtry, Greg. He also said that, listen, I cannot safely cover our retreat east to the Jerusalem Plank Road if they don't withdraw from Reams Station quickly. So basically what he's saying is that we're going to get encircled here by Hampton's cavalry and Hill if we don't do something. So with this information in hand, just about 8 p.m., Hancock is going to order Special Order GTFO, right? And he's going to order a full retreat. And he turned to his staffer, just like you said, right? "I don't want to care to die, but I pray to God I may never leave this field."
Yeah.
And an hour later, the Federals had pulled back to the east and turned into a mad dash to get to that Jerusalem Plank Road to head north back towards Globe Tavern. And it was a mass run. It was a complete turkey shoot for the Rebs. They were running like hell. And one of the guys who were captured was Hancock's adjutant, Francis Walker, the one we talked about before. Now, A.P. Hill is starting to feel better at this point, but he decides against pursuing the fleeing Second Corps, and he focuses on capturing artillery and any federal wounded or Federals who didn't feel like running anymore. He's like, we'll capture the
Yeah.
guys here. But here's the thing. In the end, Hill and Hampton are going to capture over 2,000 men
Mhm.
of Hancock's Second Corps on that retreat, which is up there with any of the great mass retreats in Civil War history. This is up there with Chancellorsville.
Yeah.
This is up there with you go ahead and you pick one. This is up there with all the big boy turning and skedaddles. First Manassas, they were running like hell, is what they were doing.
It's very much like Chancellorsville. And the one thing I was asking you today was, would there have been men here, Confederates, that were involved in that 11th Corps route at Chancellorsville?
I mean, it's very possible.
Like
I
it's
mean,
because it's Hill's guys, right?
you had Hill's guys, so I imagine
Yeah.
I'm sure there probably would have been. But we're just looking at some of the numbers with this. Hancock's two divisions took a beatdown at Reams Station.
Yes.
They took 2,602 casualties. Again, 2,000 of them captured. They lost 9 artillery pieces. Hancock took this as a big time personal loss.
Yeah.
He wrote after, the enemy brought everything that they could rake and scrape, and we ought to have whipped them. Now, following the battle, a little rift grew between Hancock and John Gibbon.
Yes, which is unfortunate because
Right.
they were quite close.
Gibbon
To
demanded a complete reorganization of the Second Corps, including Hancock gone and him being he was going to resign. He's like, I'm not doing this. But it was only after Hancock personally apologized to Gibbon that he kept his letter from being sent and never made it public, is how it was.
And what's interesting about that is Gibbon will later in 1864 take a leave of absence from the Army of the Potomac. It is not for anything physical. But it is to do with the relationship he had with Hancock was never the same after that. Now Gibbon will come back, but when he does, he's been reassigned to the Army of the James. So there is definitely something that happened here at Reams Station between the two of them. And I think it's because I think Gibbon just he bit back at Hancock and he bit back hard. And Gibbon was not a guy, I can tell you, John Gibbon, I would not want to cross that man. And apparently he was honest to a point. He didn't give a crap if he hurt your feelings or not.
No, no. Another one of Hancock's his longtime friends and former Mexican wingman Henry Heath, who was opponent of this battle, knew what the pain that this cost his old friend Winnie Boy. He did.
Yeah.
Heath wrote after the battle, if Hancock's heart could have been examined, there would have been written on it Reams as plainly as the deep scars received at Gettysburg and other fields were visible. Now, for Lee, this lopsided win at Reams Station was a real shot in the arm for him and something they really needed to reorganize his men. A North Carolina soldier said, a few days after the battle, I never saw men so much elated by any fight. But again, unfortunately for Lee, this did not break Grant's grip on the Weldon Railroad. It did loosen it a little bit, but the lifeblood of the supply line to North Carolina was still open. He was able to keep it open for the most part. Now, we didn't mention Grant. He's sick throughout this battle, but he's still positive when he got the news back at headquarters of City Point. The way he saw it, like we said a little while ago, was the fight at Reams Station. It was not ideal, but it kept Lee from sending men to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So he could have done that. Whether he was going to, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
But it didn't happen.
Well, what's interesting about Grant's, when Grant in his memoirs, he does not really talk about Reams Station at all. He mentions it. It's not even a paragraph. So that's how kind of he sees it. But I also think too, is he maybe downplaying it because he wasn't there and Meade was. And there was one article I read talking about how, Meade is fighting like Meade does. And I love Meade. He is one of my favorite commanders. And I don't think he gets enough credit for what he does in the Civil War, but he's a very different general than what General Grant is. Had General Grant been feeling well and been closer to where they were, not back at his headquarters, could Ream Station have gone differently and not been the route that it was? Like that's one of the things that is kind of the what if with this battle. If Grant had been there and been able to advise a little bit more, would it have been
Well,
different?
I don't think it would have been. And I'll tell you something about Meade. Okay, obviously, do you think Meade took the blame for this?
Oh, absolutely not. I
He
don't
did
think
not. You know who he blamed for Ream Station?
Hancock.
Hancock.
Yep.
In a remarkable letter to his wife Marguerite, he wrote, Hancock, just remember we said before about Hancock sending those messages saying, I don't know how many guys we have. We don't know where they're
Yep.
coming. Do I
Yep.
stay? Do I go? Give me some orders.
Yep.
Just keep that in the back of your head as I read this letter from Meade to his wife. This is what Meade wrote about Ream Station. Okay. Hancock expressed himself as confident in maintaining his position and did not call for reinforcements, which I nonetheless sent as soon as I find out how heavily he was engaged. So he threw
Wow.
he threw Hancock under the bus here, is what he did. He absolutely
Wow.
did. Blaming Hancock is interesting based on the fact that Meade insisted on using couriers instead of a telegraph,
Yeah.
and Hancock himself noted how confusing Meade's orders were back to Meade, right?
Wow.
This, and so this just keep that in mind, right? The Second Corps after Reams Station was a shadow of itself after this, but the Northern press kept pumping their tires about the legendary Second Corps.
Yeah.
After the battle, papers in the North declared Hancock's effort as a success. But one of the most famous Civil War nurses in Civil War history, Cornelia Hancock,
Yeah.
she wrote a friend on August 27th. Okay, you know what it said? It said, We were whipped badly on the Weldon Railroad, no
Yes.
matter what the papers say.
Well, and I think that goes back to what Grant, how he does not really talk about it much in his memoirs. It's reduced to like, I think it's less than a paragraph. It's kind of like when you look at Sherman's memoirs with some of the battles in the Atlanta campaign that do not go well for him, in particular Pickett's Mill, which he does not even mention at all. But some of the other ones that were really, really bad, he's like, yeah, we had a bad day, but moving on to the next thing, which was a victory.
Mm-hmm.
But regarding Hancock and Meade, I wonder if this goes back to Gettysburg, and this is some of this personality clashes that happen in the Civil War that are nothing to do with military, but you have personalities, they're humans, they clash. Um, and if you remember after Gettysburg, Hancock did get upset when Meade was getting a lot of the credit
Mm-hmm.
for the Battle of Gettysburg. And I'm sure there was, some stuff said that was not very good. But it seems like after that, there might have been a bit of a rivalry between the two of them. And that's probably
Mm-hmm.
coming out in what Meade is writing to his wife, which isn't fair to Hancock, who is like, what do I do? He's
No.
not telling his wife how it is. Um, and he's sending very mixed messages and stuff. And it's clear that Meade in this, because he's having to kind of fill the shoes of Grant to some extent because Grant is sick and he's having to make more decisions. Like Meade, this is like where Meade is kind of like in over his head a little bit, I think. And I'm saying
Well,
that as someone who loves Meade a lot. Like he's
yeah, who knows what it was? But there was one positive story that came out of the Battle of Reams Station that really captured the imagination of the North, and that is the story of an Irish-born private named Patrick Ginley
mm,
of the First New York Light Artillery. Now, after the battle, he was serving as an orderly. I mean, this is at the battle. I mean, he was serving as an orderly when the Rebs hit. He was ordered to find Hancock and pass on a message, which he ultimately gave to Nelson Miles. That's who he gave it to. While handing Miles the note, a bullet scratched Miles' face while he was reading it. And Ginley wrote, I never saw such a face as the one he made when he was struck by that bullet. Anyway, but
yeah.
Ginley returned to his men, and when he was told again to accompany a colonel to check out the rebel breakthrough, and as they were both riding to that railroad cut, he saw his partner captured, and soon his own horse was shot and he fell to the ground. Now, he's on the ground lying between the Union and the Confederate lines so close he could hear each commander on each side giving orders. That's how close he was. But the
Wow.
Rebs didn't know he was there. He was kind of there, and he found a canister, and an open canister, and he snuck up to a cannon. And while he was doing that, he found another Union soldier that was kind of hiding in the grass too. And so they kind of were in cahoots together, decided we're going to sneak this canister into the cannon and we're going to fire it at the Rebs, is what he's going to do. So they get to the cannon. He has his friend put his finger on the vent while he loads it. Right at that moment, his friend gets shot in the chest and he gets killed instantly. But what happens
Oh,
is Ginley pulls the lanyard, the canister explodes and blows half the Rebs to hell. The blast is going to kill several Confederates. And then, like you, when you egg a house, you turn and you run like hell after you do it. He starts to turn and
yep.
he runs. Now, while he's going, he sees the fallen flag of the 28th Massachusetts Regiment, commanded by James Fleming, and he's trying to rally his men. And so Ginley grabs the flag and all of a sudden starts waving it and starts yelling, "Follow me, boys."
Mm.
And instead of running back, he leads the Massachusetts men. He's a private back to the front where they counterattack and they attacked before they fell back. But it was an amazing story. This action was personally noted by U.S. Grant after the battle, and he said of Ginley, "It is not today nor tomorrow that you and every man undergoing the hardships of this war will be remembered by your country for his services." Years later, November 25th, the greatest day in the calendar, of 1890, Patrick Ginley, nicknamed Paddy the Horse by his men,
Patty the
was a,
horse.
was a guest at the reunion of the Irish Brigade at the Riccadonna Hotel in New York City. And the highlight of that event and why he was invited to that event was he received the Congressional Medal of Honor from his action at Reams Station for what he did with that
Wow.
28th Massachusetts flag. So it was the one positive story that kind of went viral after the war,
Yeah.
that this Irish immigrant did what he did to help rally the 28th Mass, which is an original Irish Brigade regiment before they flipped to the 29th. They were the non-Irish Irish, remember, Mary.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what Reams Station did is it was a situation where, again, you put men too far and you don't support them. We said
Yep.
the big three get you all the time: communication, weather, and terrain.
Yep.
And it was kind of all three, but mostly
Yeah.
communication.
Communication was definitely not great
Yeah.
here.
Well, we'll never know why Meade chose to send couriers instead of a telegraph. And
Yeah.
that's one of those mysteries in life that no one will ever know.
Yeah.
Because Hancock's sending telegrams back.
Yeah. That's
Meade's
a
getting,
like,
the, Meade's getting the telegrams and sending couriers back. And it's delaying it by 3 hours. And again, Hancock got routed here. There's no doubt about it. But at
mhm.
the same time, at the end of the day, you have to feel for Hancock because
Yep.
just like Howard with Chancellorsville,
Yeah.
he was put in a situation where he had no chance to succeed. And
Exactly.
what and at the end of the day, what happens? You have to turn and run like hell, and that was Hancock's moment. And
Yep.
of all the good moments he's had, this is the one that's right up there with all the bad ones because he was put in a situation that really wasn't his fault. He
Yep.
did try to do his best and rally his men, but again, he was put on an end that he had no chance to succeed in and was told to basically do your best and didn't have correct orders. And so at the end of the day, Reams Station is going to be one of the more embarrassing moments for the Union Army in the Overland
Yep.
Campaign. Um, that's going to kind of go on from there.
Yep. And I do have a quote from Meade where he says, "These frequent affairs are gradually thinning both armies. And if we can only manage to make the enemy lose more than we do, we will win in the long run. But unfortunately, the offensive being forced on us causes us to seek battle on the enemy's terms, and our losses are accordingly the greatest, except when they come out and attack, as recently, when they always get the worst of it." And this is kind of, I read that and I thought, wow, this is kind of what Sherman is going through on the Atlanta campaign as well, because there was a moment, I think it was after Kennesaw Mountain, that battle where Thomas, Sherman was kind of like, well, it was a small battle, blah, blah, blah. And Thomas was like, we have many more of those, and we're not going to have any men left when we get to Atlanta. Like they're thinning the men out. So it's very interesting. Like as much as we contrast the Eastern and Western theater quite a bit, this is something that is happening that is similar. That the both armies, the Army of the Tennessee, or like, well, there's three different armies out there in the West with Sherman. What Sherman's doing, what Grant is doing. There have been two commanders, Thomas in the West, and then now Meade in the East that have said what is happening is thinning these armies in 1864, which I found very, very interesting. And Ream Station is one of those battles that is one of those ones that is thinning them out, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah.
But I definitely agree with what you said. The Hancock, he does get routed. This is a very human moment for him. This is not his best moment in the Civil War, but there's also more to blame than him in this as well.
Like anything else, it's tough. It's impossible to label a commanding general and blame him
Yeah,
for a rout in a retreat, because and when you study these specifically, you get closer into it, you realize there's a lot more to it than just what's on its face, and that's
yeah,
the story of Ream Station. So
yeah.
what's coming up for us, Mary? What's next for us?
So our next episode is going to be I don't think it's going to be in 2 weeks. I think it's going to be in 3 weeks. But
Oh,
we are going to be talking about the Battle of Jonesboro, which is kind of our bookend for the episode we just did on Battle of Peachtree Creek, which is kind of the final push that begins the final push towards General Sherman getting Atlanta. The Battle of Jonesboro is going to be kind of that last big battle that happens before he gets Atlanta on September the 2nd, 1864, and he secures that city for the Union. So we're going to be back in the Western Theater for our next episode. Also, we will be doing cocktails and cannonballs again with
mhm.
the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, and I believe the date is September 20th.
September 20th. Be there, be
Yes.
square. So we'll talk more about that. Watch the socials for that. But it's a great fundraiser for the Great
Yes.
National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We did it last year. We did some trivia.
We're going to be doing
Um,
trivia. We'll have books to give away, all that fun
this
stuff.
this going to be books. The good folks from Getty's Gear are going to be there. There's a lot of our friends will be doing some living historian stuff there. Great people, great people you want to support. No question about that. All
Yeah.
right. So, any final words from you there, Fincheru?
Well, thank you for bringing it like you always do. You are definitely the one on this podcast that is very well versed in Eastern theater because
Well,
I get so lost when I'm back in the Eastern theater studying it.
Well, that's okay. You
Yep.
did okay, Mary. You did okay. All right. So, everybody, we appreciate you listening. Thanks so much. We're going to deal with a hurricane here tomorrow. So, hopefully,
Hmm.
it passed by you. Hopefully, the rain and the wind has settled down. And we will go off to the weekend. Have a great time, Mary. Go Braves. Go Board
Yeah,
Bravos.
go
Hey,
Born Braves. Three-peat.
bye, Katuit. Bye, Katuit. Anyway,
Yep.
have a great day. We'll talk to you all on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
Yep. Bye, guys.